Hey everyone, Dan here. We are just before market close on Friday, June 25th. Today we're going to take an updated look at 23andMe. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also feel free to share these videos. If you share things like this on Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, those would go a long way. All right, so today we're going to take a look at the macro and the micro chart. So the macro chart, we're going to do a 1 month because if we look at the 3 month, which is usually what I like to do, 3 or 6 months, it's just a bit unusable because from like June 8th through March 25th, it's just a flat line and it has nothing to do with today's price activity. But if I go a month, and even then trim off about a week and a half or 2 weeks, then we're actually more in the ballpark. So this is like a 2.5, 3 week chart, we'll call it, but it's the 1 hour time frame. And then we'll zoom in and do a 5-day, 5-minute look. So the idea here is basically the longer term chart. This one would be for folks that are looking for a longer term position, maybe a long swing trade, several weeks or months, or an investment opportunity that's going to last, several months or years even. And then on the micro, those are for folks who might be looking to day trade 23andMe or do shorter term swing trades that last a day or a few days. Okay, so this is the chart that we had drawn last time we analyzed this, and that was just before the official merger when the ticker symbol change happened. And so we can sort of see what's been happening since then. So we have a resistance zone here that it broke through and turned into support. That's what we look for with all of these zones. If the zone is above the current price action, we look for it to hit resistance there and then turn that resistance into support. And then if it is below where the price action is, we look for it to catch that as a support zone. And so we see it like making its way through a bunch of these zones and bouncing off in a bunch of places. So the chart has held up really, really well. Right now, you could sort of like look at this a couple of ways. So one, it had this big run up here from about, say, 10.5 to almost 14. But it's pulled back to just under 12. And, so that's a bit like steeper of a retracement. It's about a 50% retracement. I would have liked to seen something more like a third of the way down, but we could still be looking at sort of a bull flag coming in here where, this is the pull. I'm going to turn this purple because I'll be looking for it to bounce out of this zone. Purple I use for bounce potential. And now, we'd be looking at something like this for the flag portion of it. This would be from here up to there. So this would be your flag. So this would be, kind of flagging out at the end of the trading day on Monday. So there is the potential that, if it stays within this realm, by the end of the day Monday, maybe then or in the after hours or even at pre-market and open on Tuesday, we see a big breakout to the upside where it goes ahead and starts to build on that 1232 support zone and then the 1250 and up from there. But it has done a good job. Let me just get rid of this for the time being because there's another sort of trend line thing happening where it was caught under this like downtrend here. So you see this catches all of this price activity underneath and tests. I mean, if you count the first, the initiating point, it tests it 3 times total, and then it broke out and has done a good job of making slightly higher lows, like nothing tremendous. But the good thing is you have this like huge volatility in the stock that causes this, like I said, 10.5 up to almost 14, and then about a 50% pullback. But now what it's essentially doing is kind of putting itself into this consolidation channel where, it's sort of like in a slow but steady consolidation upward. And what we'll just want to make sure is if it doesn't fall out of this channel before it has the chance to flag out, which would be like Monday or first thing on Tuesday, and start a downtrend, because that could also happen as it's flagging out here, because it's a bit of an odd pattern where it had this big run down, and so if we take that, it bounced out of there, but it just bounced out sideways, and so it's doing more consolidating than anything, even though it is slightly up. So I would watch that channel pretty closely, because also, it's only tested the top once here. So the question is, like, is it really in this thing, or can it even, because like the most recent, highs are lower highs. So that's, not the most ideal situation. So that's what we'd want, is for it to push through and at least test the upper bound of this channel again in the very, very near future, in order to kind of confirm that this channel is fleshing out and is sort of sustaining itself, and it could keep moving within that, even though it's a very tight bound. So that's what I would be looking for, essentially that flag out toward the end of trading day on Monday. Until then, it might be, relatively sideways again, or we could see that, happening even sooner, but that's what I would be looking for. On the indicator side of things, the RSI is under the midpoint, so pretty low on the RSI. Definitely nothing there preventing some good run-up power from coming through. It's almost, I guess it hasn't recently reached oversold, really. It's been overbought several times. So it's had pretty good relative price strength. Its lower end of the RSI is really about like 32, 34, 36, somewhere around there, and then it comes up toward overbought or into overbought territory. And on the MACD, we have basically a flattening out here, nothing really happening at all. Talk about true consolidation fashion. I mean, there's barely even bullish or bearish instances on the histogram. So nothing real to talk about there. It's just kind of sitting at the baseline waiting for the next big move, which could be sort of an indication of that potential breakout, like I had mentioned before. The other thing that I wanted to look at, if we pull back out here, let me pull back out to the month and then zoom in again so I can catch all of these. So one thing that I did notice, and stocks often are this thing or they are not this thing, and this thing is a gap filler. So some stocks really tend to fill gaps, leave gaps and fill them quite often, and some stocks really tend to either not leave gaps, or if they do leave them, they just don't really fill them. So if you see, this one here was filled, and one thing to remember when we're looking at gap fill, we're looking at to fill both on the way down and then back on the way up. This is the point at which, here is the point at which I would have considered this gap filled, not here. I would have said, okay, it's only filled it from the top down, so now we should be looking for it to come back up and fill it from the bottom up. Okay, and then we have this one here, and we see that rode down, filled it from the top down, and then came up and eventually filled it from the bottom up. And in the course of that, it left another gap. I mean, this is like, it just really stood out to me. And then here we see it filled it from the top down really quickly right here, and then from the bottom up also pretty quickly. And then it came up here. This is the one that I'm interested in. So that's just to sort of show there's a history here. This is the one that I'm interested in, because this gap would stretch up to over 1350. So 1360-ish, 1360, yeah, at the top of that gap fill. So that's a good percentage increase from this 1180 that we see it at right now. And, again, if you look, it only filled it from the top down and a partial from the bottom up, which is like nothing. So what I'd be looking for at some point here is a ride back up the elevator, because there aren't any gap fills that I see on the downside that are yet to be filled. I mean, this one is filled, this one is filled, and those would be the only ones that are sort of like at or under the current price action. So if this, previous pattern, these three, and then 4, 5 kind of show us anything, it's that so far 23andMe seems to be a gap creator and a gap filler. So I would really look for that in the coming days. That could be part of the big breakout that we would see as a result of that sort of flagging out pattern that we first drew in with the purple, and it might push it up to fill this. If that's the case, I'm going to throw right now an upper price zone to look really strong and hard about whether you might want to take profit at or around as you approach that 1360, and then again obviously rate at about that 1390, because it may top out there again before it does anything else. But that's what I'd be looking for. There is also a pretty decent zone right about here, so I might as well chart this while we're here. On the way up, I could see some stickiness right around this. Well, that's right at $13. Okay, so right at the $13 mark, I could see some a resistance zone there as well, that it grabs support, fills that gap, and then it's sort of like Wild West. Could kind of do anything after it fills that gap. So we'd really want to just kind of see what it's doing at that time. All right, so I'm actually going to go ahead and snapshot this because I want to save this for myself before I delete it in order to show the micro chart. All right, so before we flip over to the micro chart, I want to mention a couple of other things. One, if you like the charting software that I'm using, folks ask me all the time, this is the desktop app from Webull. Webull has, they've done a great job of improving their charting capabilities over time. They've gotten to a pretty solid place, and so I find it pretty easy to use. And they're also a free broker, so if you're looking for a place to trade that includes pre-market and after hours and options trading and paper trading, these sorts of things. I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like to sign up for Webull. And then also there's another very user-friendly, very sort of like quick and pretty kind of app that you wouldn't use it for charting or anything like that, but if you know the trade and you just want to go execute a trade really quickly, Gatsby is an awesome opportunity. It's just really modern, really user-friendly, quick execution times, and you can do shares and options, and I think that they've also just rolled out instant deposits, so you can get access to up to $1,000 of a deposit instantly to trade on without waiting for it to settle. That link is in the description below as well. Last thing is also a newsletter that I'm planning to roll out in the coming months. So if you want another sort of like way to stay in touch, way that I can send you trade ideas, things that I see that are potential opportunities or impactful, that would be like a once or twice a week kind of email that I would send out. It wouldn't be super, what's the word? Oppressive to your inbox. And I'm going to put a link in the description below to drop your email if you want to be on that list. Again, it won't roll out for a couple of months, so I'm just collecting emails at this point, but that will sort of get you on the list, and then I'll check in with folks to see if they want to continue to be on it before I send the first slew of emails. All right, so the micro chart. So zooming in here, this looks, obviously you can see this uptrend, this slight up channel that we are looking at a little bit cleaner here. So if we lop off this top, which again, like drawing a channel, I just look for it to catch about 90% of the price action. Test the bottom once, top twice, bottom twice, and right now would be a third time, and it looks like it's bouncing off of that at the moment, right at market close. So if that's the case, then it would have sort of like confirmed the channel a couple of times on both ends, which would be a good sign. And it could be something to at least ride up a little bit. And again, the way that I play channels for short-term stuff is I buy the dip at the bottom. So say you bought here at 11.45, you ride it to the top, 12.18, sell. You then wait, so you're going to miss this one, and you would have bought at the bottom again. If you counted this at say 11.78, and then you'd be waiting for it to ride to the top at this point, and maybe adding to your position here, or just sort of like hoping that this holds. Just keep in mind all channels eventually break, so at some point it will fall out of this channel to the bottom side, or it will break out of the channel to the upside, and it won't return. And so in that case, you just sort of want to delete it, and it's just sort of an artifact at that point. But some short-term price zones that I would be looking at that are probably very strong for support and resistance would be right about here. You have this previous resistance and support. You have support here. You have some support there, and some resistance back here as well. So that should be a pretty solid zone, that 11.93. Something to catch it sooner besides the bottom of the channel is really just kind of the bottom of the channel. I mean, I guess just under it. There is always the possibility that it falls out of the channel just briefly, but then starts to come up to the channel again. In that case, I wouldn't consider it leaving the channel. I would just consider it, stretching the channel a little bit like we saw up here, but it like immediately came back in, right? It was out of there at like 9:35, and it was back in by 10:45. So it's not like it really left the channel for good. So that could happen to the downside too, but I look for potentially a strong bounce at that 11.77 in the short term because of this support here, and then this resistance all through here the day before. And then if you need another catch zone on the downside, this 11.67 should be a good option to catch a big bounce, or at least I would look for it to hold, and if it doesn't, sort of look out for additional space for it to fall below, because you have resistance points here, and then you have support points in between, and support the day after, so it should be a relatively strong zone. On the upside, besides just the channel, I would look for some resistance there, 12.05 in the near term, and probably right about here, 12.16. So a bunch of stops along the way, but it's a lower priced stock. So, we often talk in terms of pennies versus dollars, or tens of dollars, until it gets its price ramped up. On the RSI side of things, very similar to the 1 hour, 44, 45 on the RSI, so plenty of opportunity for it to catch a bounce here at the bottom of the channel. And on the MACD, this doesn't look as flat, so that's nice. So you have, a nice bullish push up here, rose the MACD up, actually not that high, just 0.06 or so on the graph, and then bearish crossover brought it down. So the bullish momentum sort of rolling over here a little bit. We'll see. It looked like it was rolling over way back here, but then it dropped down some more. So we'll see if it can actually roll over this time, get a bullish cross right around the baseline, which would leave it plenty of room to run up if it wanted to. It would be nicer to see sort of a stretch up. It seems to top out around that like 0.6 a lot of times here, seeing several of that leaning back. So I guess if it does start to swing up, I would watch it very closely as it approaches like the same height as this one, because it seems like a lot of times it wants to reverse course then. So that could be an opportunity to kind of lock in profit, trim some, to set some on the side, or what have you. But depends how closely you're watching it and how minute to minute you're playing this one. But I would keep an eye on it there. All right. The only other thing I wanted to mention for me is that, I haven't seen yet any analyst ratings coming out, so I would expect in the near future for some analysts to start to come in and put price targets on here, hit it with some kind of a rating. So I would expect that to have a pretty sizable impact on the price activity at the time at which that news drops, since it would be sort of like the kickoff period of those things. And so for the first few of those that come, they're likely to be pretty impactful, at least in the short term, like that trading day, or that first half of the trading day, or what have you. So look for those potential catalysts as well, because they should be coming probably in the next few weeks. All right, well, good luck if you're trading this one. I hope you had a good trading week no matter what you're trading, and enjoy your weekend. I will see you in the next video.